What's next for a neighborhood under siege? We'll have to wait and see. Reporting live, Sadie Sinclair, Channel 7 News.
This is San Francisco.
A lot of you will know that I worked on a book with Miss Major. Miss Major Speaks. Miss Major is a Black trans mother of trans circles here in the Bay and many other places. The book owes a lot of its existence to the movie. The documentary Major, directed by two of Major's family members here in the Bay, Annalise Ophelian, the film's director, and co-producer StormMiguel Florez. They're going to talk about the documentary in the context of the targeting of trans people by the right wing, as well as people that we don't necessarily associate with the right wing, but we should, like Gavin Newsom. It's a super Bay Area movie filmed in large part in San Francisco and Oakland. And you can and should go see the film when it shows for its 10th anniversary at the Roxie on June 8th. Miss Major is scheduled to be in attendance. It's a tearjerker and a heartwarmer of a movie that, if you haven't seen, you need to see. If you are able, please support this podcast on Patreon, patreon.com/SadFrancisco. You sign up for $20 or more, you will get a copy of Miss Major Speaks, signed by Miss Major herself and me. I'll link the trailer in the show notes, and again, go see it on June 8th. Thank you too so much. I can't believe it's been 10 years, just a little over 10 years since we met. And now Major, the documentary, is coming back to the big screen in San Francisco very, very soon. I wanted to have an episode that looks back, looks ahead, but mostly just wanted an excuse to like chit chat with you two again. I just talked to Major this afternoon when we're recording this on Saturday on May 24th, and she's very excited. She said she's coming to the premiere on June 8th.
Is she?
Awesome.
Is this the first you've heard of it?
We had a whole conversation about it, and she's like, oh, I'm not going to be able to make it out to that one.
Okay, well,
yeah. I might we might check to confirm that. We might check to confirm that before we made it public, just because I don't want to. I don't want to sign Major up for anything more than she's doing. And she was just with the film in North Carolina for the Comfrey Film Festival, which sounded amazing. Love that festival.
Yeah. So she said something about like a red eye from New York City, straight into your arms.
I love the notion of that. This is, in fact, the first we've heard of it. But this is also what it means for us to do work in community, where like your arms need to be ready.
Thank you.
And ours definitely are. So yeah, that's fantastic.
Excellent transition into the questions that I wanted to pose to y'all about this big, beautiful film. But starting at the very, very, very beginning, for those who don't know, how did you meet Major and how did the film come to be?
Yeah, so I think I do this part of the story. When I was in grad school for psychology, I wanted to do a non-traditional doctoral dissertation, and so I decided to make a documentary film, which, was in hindsight hilarious because it meant I both made a documentary and wrote a dissertation. Why do one laborious thing when you could do two? And my dissertation was a collection of trans and gender nonconforming scholars, artists, and activists talking about their personal experience of the what was then the gender identity disorder diagnosis. And in the process of doing that work, which was a very phenomenological process that was about also changing the way we do documentaries so that the people the documentary is about are actually sort of in charge of the narrative, but also deeply involved in the editing process.
Yeah.
I made up this like dream list of who would it be amazing to talk to about this. People who've already been using personal experience and history as a teaching tool. And, like Miss Major's on that list. Like I think anyone who has a sort of, if I could talk with any of our like kind of community elders, community leaders, who would that be? Major was on the list. And so I cold called her and said, hey, I'm working on this documentary. Are you interested? And she just sort of like warmly and generously and immediately said yes. Miss Major's been in front of a lot of cameras. I love this about the way that we hold her story filmically. She's been either a participant in or the subject of a lot of documentaries.
Yep.
And so I met her at the time she was going through kidney dialysis. Like, I think she came to her interview day from dialysis. It was, unbeknownst to me, Fleet Week. This was, early in my production life where you don't do we're filming outside. What's the schedule? So all of our BTS from that day is all of us sitting in this back garden just staring up, waiting for the Blue Angels to pass. Yeah. And we would time it. So we'd have these like 2 minutes in between flybys.
Yep.
And then in which Major could talk uninterrupted, and she would just like come in and like nail every single piece. And so we met doing that work and then doing the editorial on that, which involved like giving her sections of the film, showing them in the context of the film, going back and forth and getting to build some rapport there. Shortly after that, StormMiguel, who you could kind of pick it up from here, started working at TGIJP. And that involved me then just coming by the office to see StormMiguel, but also because I was in the office all the time, hanging out with Major. And there was a point at which Major would frequently just sort of be like, when are we making another movie? Like, everyone tells me I need to make a movie out of my life. When are we doing a movie? And then we had a day where I came in and she's just like, I had a dream we made a movie together. And so you need to tell me when this is going to happen.
Okay.
Because like I had this dream, we were making a movie, and let's do it. And so we just started kind of talking more in earnest about what that could look like.
No.
Yeah, and the hilarious thing is that it was like, yeah, we'll do a short, like, which is always just like the famous.
Every project starts off
famous last word. We'll do a short. No. Yeah, so I had met Major in community at events, but I really got to know Major when I started working at TGI Justice. Because she was my boss. I feel like did we meet over on 9th Street, Toshio, when I worked over at...
Yes. Yeah.
That was such a great office.
Drop off some copies of The Abolitionist, the critical resistance newspaper, where we'd interviewed some folks from TGIJP.
Yeah, I loved that spot. It was just like, it just was like a big living room with a bunch of, like 3 desks and really nice open space. So yeah, work was like hanging out. Like if people dropped in, we'd all be sitting, being able to visit with them from our desks or go to sit with them on a couch, kind of wherever you are in that room, you're hanging out. So when I was working there, and Annalise would come and hang out, and these conversations would happen. And I remember that too. Like, just every time you came in, when are you making a movie about me? The girls say a movie should be made about me. Yep.
Yeah, no, I mean, I did this little book collaboration with Major, and she knows how to plant the seed and make it grow. And the book came to be, I think, similar to that. It's so interesting that you mentioned, Annalise, this like 10 years ago, how it was still a moment where people were making movies sort of like irresponsibly, documentaries, as well as written biographies. Talk about anthropologists going into a scene where they have no experience, they know no one, and they're just objective. There. Yeah, totally. Yeah, same with journalism. I think it's like, I think that the definition of like what is like responsible journalism is changing, given that in the past so much of it has been done by somebody going into a community, picking and choosing what they want, and then like peace.
As if like not knowing what you're looking at somehow makes you more qualified. Like, it's such a colonial view as well, right? That we go into communities that are not ours. We take their resources, which is to say story and narrative and experiential expertise. We remove it from the community to then basically process it and refine it for consumption by people outside of the community, which I often do think of as actually the film festival circuit, as these like, bless Sundance. Someday I will be at Sundance, and I will be so happy to be at Sundance, but because I get an annual rejection letter from Sundance, I can say like, this is an incredibly hard festival to make it to. So I think about I think about these festivals that are considered like where you want to screen your prestige documentary, but guarantee the subjects of most documentary film cannot access the spaces that are considered the most prestige to screen them in. And so like, I do think that there was, I guess 13 years ago that we started production, it's felt like it was still a newer concept. Sam Fader and I had conversations about this actually, as we were in production on Major, and about the way that it was important to like compensate people for making, like, make sure that they got to their interview and they were taken care of, and like having transparent conversations about like what are we doing with, you know, like how the budget on this film works. But that this was considered somehow like it'll spoil the objectivity of your work if you involve people. Like, especially, you can't let people see the rough cut. You can't let them have input on the rough cut. That spoils the objectivity, especially in communities whose stories have been told by others to great harm. Like, why would you not want to center the expertise of the people whose story it is, who might just not have access to traditional publishing or, you know, to film distribution?
Yeah, this is one of those movies that helped us think that regardless of where politics are, like on the national stage and in DC and Sacramento, the film world has been changed as a result of movies like this one, certainly like documentaries more generally. How did you know of Major?
I've been in San Francisco for 30 years. I went to the first Critical Resistance. I feel like through abolition circles is how I first heard about Miss Major. It's so funny. I'm trying to think of like a time of being out in Korea in the Bay and connected to trans community when you don't know Miss Major. She just feels like such a part of the fabric here. I mean, certainly when we were touring the film, one of the things we heard regularly from people was, I'm embarrassed to not have known about her before seeing this doc. And I'm like, yeah, but also our communities can sometimes be very regional. And like Major is a national, she's an international movement leader. And also I get how we sometimes know the people who are in our immediate kind of proximity the most.
For sure. When you were making this film, I mean, social media was it still felt like a newer way that people were connecting. It was that long ago. Anything that you all wish could have made it into the film that didn't make the final cut?
I always think of Sharon's interview, Sharon Grayson, who spoke extensively about when her and Major worked at TARC, which is the Tenderloin AIDS Resource Center, or which was, it's not around anymore. But, and telling the story about basically how it was two separate storefronts or buildings. And, you know, there was one side where there were like services, and then there was another side where trans women, mostly trans women, they would be able to have their groups, but they'd have to go outside and back in order to get to the place where the services were. I don't know if I'm telling this right. And at some point, Major was just like, this is ridiculous. They shouldn't have to go outside to go back in. And this feels really separate. And said, let's just bust a hole through the wall so that they can go in and out. And she did. She talked Sharon, I guess, they got sledgehammers and busted a hole through the wall. And then the folks who ran the whole place had no choice but then to make that a walkway.
Right. And literal hammer to the brick wall.
And we had that story, and we were in love with that story, and it was in just about every cut up until the final, because it didn't go with the flow quite with the film, and we had to drop something because of time, and it was heartbreaking. Like that was they said kill your darlings, and that was the darling that I felt like it was heartbreaking to drop that, because Sharon told it so beautifully. It felt like just a perfect example of how Major operates, but we ultimately had to make the choice to let that story go. We ended up making Majorettes, which was shorts. And I feel like that story might have been an inspiration for the Majorettes. It's like, well, what are we going to do? Let's make it a short. And so we just, Majorettes were just little shorts that were different people telling stories that didn't make it into the film.
Yeah, and people could view those as well, like the special clips not in the final film. How do they access those?
I feel like the Majorettes are all linked off of missmajorfilm.com.
Yep.
And they're all on Vimeo. They're free to watch. I mean, anytime, like, documentary is the ratio of what you shoot to what ends up in the final cut is sometimes like, you know, it's 100-to-1. You just end up with like terabytes of footage, and it's so challenging. I think especially in biographical documentary, you know, like at the time, Miss Major was, I'm going to use her kind of shtick of 70 years old, and had lived such a life. Like, her experiences intersected so many different movements, and there was just no way of getting everything in there. And so you have to kind of pick And a cohesive narrative film is an audiovisual media. So we also had to tell the stories that we had, a combination of cohesive audio storytelling with enough visual interest. One thing that always has kind of maybe haunted me is the fact that Majors raised more than one child. Like, she was really, really passionate about Christopher and her relationship with her son Christopher being in the film. But she had multiple children that she sort of adopted and raised over the years, and had experiences as a trans parent being run out of towns with her kids, sometimes, like, violently so. And there wasn't a way of telling the totality of that story without it occupying both a tremendous amount of space, without us having access to all of the various people involved in the story. And so, kind of for story clarity, we ended up focusing on Christopher, but it can feel like through omission you end up sort of suggesting that somehow she just raised one child over the course of her life, but she did not. She raised multiple children. And of course now she's got Asaya, now she's got, like, another beautiful kid that she's raising. So I think about things like that. I think the thing that always stands out in my mind, Major is just, like, so beautifully comfortable in her body, and in addition to, like, giving the best hugs, frequently would kind of, like, lounge au natural. And I do have some just, like, beautiful footage of her just kind of, like, kicking it naked, telling stories with, like, the best light in this way that I was just like, this is the most, like, beautiful human, and I'm so excited to just be like, and she would be just like, why isn't your camera on? I was like, okay, we'll turn the camera on. And there was not, a place to put those, but I often think, like, I just want to make sure somehow this, like, record of Major just, like, and at the time, like, Joe Nathan trying to, like, get her dressed for an event and handing her a bra and her, like, throwing it back, being like, have you ever seen me wear a bra? When am I going to wear a bra? Just, like, these sweet, just really real moments that I think show, just, like, the kind of way that she moves through the world.
Yeah, I mean, because even in 2025, people are so weird about bodies and, letting it all hang out. And Major is not, and has not as long as I've known her, for sure.
When we were filming, in fact, like, one of the early conversations we had was around, like, how do you want to appear on film? Do you want a hair and makeup artist? Like, it was very, like, this is your story. You tell me how you want to show up. And she was really adamant that she did not want hair and makeup in any of her interviews, that she wanted the girls to see her with hair, without hair, fresh-faced, like, as she was, and to represent the sort of insistence on value without having this burden of presenting herself in a kind of, like, gender performative way. And so it was lovely that, like, that was also, like, she very much dictated how she showed up on film.
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes across in the movie for anyone who's seen it. What was the hardest thing about making documentary?
I mean, I can think of a couple of things. The first was there was a learning curve when we first started filming, and we filmed over a couple of years. And run and gun documentary, when you're still trying to do some, like, seated interviews, you're trying to just sit down and get a story from someone. Originally, I would come in with what would be a very tight crew, right? There'd be, like, 4 of us maybe. I'm there to interview. We'd have a camera person, a person running lights, and a person running sound. And when you're bringing a film crew to anybody, you're scheduling it, you're scheduling your crew. We'd be renting equipment. We'd be loading up a gear van. And we'd have times where we would show up and she would have had a medication shift, or, like, be experiencing, like, really bad side effects from something, be tired, just not be in a space to talk. And we realized really quickly that trying to do kind of structured interviews was not going to be feasible for the project. But that learning curve was a bit on the rough side. And so what we really kind of turned it into is sort of me with, at the time, my, like, Canon 5D showing up and just kind of setting up a little field recorder and just doing things on my own, which would also be a matter of, like, showing up and hanging out and then deciding if we wanted to turn a camera on. Figuring out how to capture footage was, I think it's always a challenge for documentary, but it felt especially unique for this one. I think absolutely the most emotionally challenging part was that we lost so many community members while we were filming. And StormMiguel lost his mother also while we were filming. There were just many, many times when we had to make a decision, and it was not actually a hard decision to make. Are we picking up a camera, or are we, like, showing up as community? And we showed up as community. But, being every phone call about who had passed. Major's apartment burned down in the middle of production, and we all kind of ran out to her place and spent a night trying to like rinse things out to try to get smoke smell out of it while she was like in a foil blanket, right? Like just the volume of things, and like, this is just life, right? Like life was happening constantly, and what we had chosen to do was a documentary that was a reflection of her history and her stories and community's experience of her, not the kind of reality show style documentary that was a real time account of what was happening in her life in the moment. And there was so much happening in her life in the moment. She had, significant health challenges. There were significant losses in community. And so emotionally navigating that and then going and really filmmaking through grief, I think, was what that became mostly as we were trying to then finish the film in post-production as well.
Yeah, all of that. And I would say like another thing that is it's pretty common, also depends on kind of the community we're working with, is the lack of archival footage, which is something we knew, but as an editor, that's a hard thing to navigate when there's virtually none of particular very important moments in history or in somebody's life.
Right.
And, a lot of that has to do with access. It has to do with like class privilege. It has to do with like, who's able to actually record things, who's able to actually create that archival material, and then like how it's kept over the years. And so there were photos, not a ton, but we kind of we got what we could. And then we worked with people to illustrate and animate some scenes that we weren't able to actually like there's a Stonewall scene. There's a couple, like one inside the bar and then one outside when people are fighting the cops. And then there's a scene in prison, which of course you're not going to have actual video footage of that, right? So those were beautifully drawn and illustrated and animated in a way that I was really happy to get to work with that. But yeah, there is that initial challenge of just like you see a lot of documentaries that have like gorgeous B-roll from the gorgeous archival B-roll of things that were actually happening with the people who are in the documentary, and we didn't really have much access to anything like that.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, and it works out beautifully in the film, I think, as well as things like Star Amarasu wrote some music for the film. It's interesting, like Stonewall, as like big of a deal as it is today, like even newspapers in New York, there was pretty minimal reporting on the 7-day riots that were going on. We came to you when the book came out. Like, fortunately, y'all had some photographs that you're preserving from around when they were being used in the film. Otherwise, some of the photos that we ended up using in the book wouldn't be in there. So thank you for doing some of that archival work.
Yeah, digitizing what Major did have felt like a huge component of the project. It never ceases to be wild to me how that like one photographer from the Village Voice who basically ran across the street as the uprising was starting is still lucky. Responsible for like the two pictures that we have. And we consistently get requests, media requests, maybe even that as frequently now, but certainly in the few years right after the film came out. And people will like ask us for like, and by people I mean, major news outlets, like the national major commercial news outlets will be like, oh, do you have some footage for us of, and then they'll like list off these things, and it's just like, no one has this footage. No one has this footage, baby. This footage does not exist. And like Storm is saying, it has to do with not just like who gets in front of the camera, who the news is covering, which I think is also tremendously important right now, right? That like this kind of erasure from media is how we end up feeling like we don't have history. But also like whether it's digital or celluloid, the experience of being houseless or frequently moving houses is one of not keeping big boxes full of photos that you meticulously bring with you throughout your life. In the film, Major talks about how her sister took all of the family photos and in a moment of, kind of having a really rough time emotionally, burned them all. And so Major has no pictures of herself as a child, as a young person, like just like very, very sparse photographic personal history because of the ways that her family history was lost. Any space that we can be creating archives, and I think we do this. Like this is also something that like we do not need commercial media to do this. We in fact do this better on our own. Every one of us has in our phones right now a vital archive of 2025. And finding ways of making sure that we are backing up, storing, sharing, preserving those archives is so important. I remember going to the New York Public Library, did like an ACT UP retrospective, maybe 10 or 15 years ago. And so they had their whole little, like, the main branch on Fifth Avenue had this whole little empty room that was this exhibit. And I have this exhibit in a shoebox in my garage. And it felt so amazing to see buttons and crack and peel stickers and posters and leaflets that like I've just kept from my, time in the early 90s, posted with little placards with dates on it under lights and given the museum treatment, and being reminded of like, oh yeah, the stuff I kind of hold on to for nostalgia is actually a document of our era, and that we all need to be treating the things that we might think of as small and personal as history.
Yeah, we're fortunate that we have, there's, a few institutions like the GLBT Historical Society is here in town. I guess they just got a new space on Market Street. And it's wild. I mean, most cities, that's just not the case. I wanted to see if you can think back to when the movie was just premiering across the country at these different film festivals and pick out like a couple favorite responses from the audience that y'all got?
I have to say, for me, it's a very selfish thing. It's when we screened it in Albuquerque, which is my hometown. Because people showed up. It was great. But it was really cool because my family showed up. And so just to have people in my life get to see this particular piece of history, this person in my life, or these people in my life that were in the film, to see Annalise's work, like it just felt like a very proud moment. And Major came with us, and my family was so excited to meet her, and everybody wanted to take pictures with her, and it was just like it was a really special night. And so more than like how the audience kind of as a whole responded, just that memory of people who are close to me, or people who I've had to struggle with in my life around being trans, were just like glomming on this Major, and getting to just like, I felt very proud in that moment. And I felt like, yeah, this is how I want you to see me, is through this person and through these people on screen. That was very special.
I mean, I've been in San Francisco for 30 years, and the Castro Theater was near and dear to me. I'm still just crying on the inside as I talk about the Castro Theater. And we sold the Castro Theater out. And it felt like, the Castro is such a challenging geographical neighborhood, and to fill that theater with queer and trans folks, and, like Black trans folks in particular, folks who have historically not been welcome in the Castro. And we really had a Castro takeover. People were writing in chalk on the sidewalks. There was like a line around the block, and to feel the love in that room. And when we talk about kind of also like screenings that are for community, I feel like so many people in that room, like that was a friends and family crowd. But if you can imagine, like, it's like, was it like 1,400 seats at the Castro of friends and family? Everybody knew someone who was in the film if they weren't in the film themselves. And so just feeling that, and that recognition, I think, like, I remember sitting next to Major, and Major just sort of like looking around, just being like, and I know, Toshio, you have gotten to have such a front row seat to this, that there's this kind of like, is this all for me? Like this kind of sweetness of not getting, humility. That everyone is there for her and for this story, and seeing people see themselves in that. So that screening was incredible. And then on the other side of the kind of production level was actually the screening in Little Rock, which had, like it was a kind of pull-up screen in a room with like some folding chairs, and it wasn't particularly full. But prior to that screening, one of the things we tried to do wherever we took the film was have a kind of meet and greet with whoever was local. And we had a hilarious comedy of errors getting to Little Rock that involved driving through East Texas overnight and rolling in 2 hours before Major had to be at this like kind of community brunch where she was going to meet a bunch of girls in community after and she kept me up all night to do this drive, right?
Yep,
like telling me
Major.
Stories about, and just like giving me stories of how she, like all the way she did, she worked as a trucker, and she would like tell me how she stayed awake. But she got to meet all of these community members where we would take the film. And that was, really important to her. Like that was kind of why she was on the tour. So just being in a room, and that was where she looked around, and she's just like, this is where I need to be organizing next. Like, okay, I want to be here. Like she got to Little Rock, and we had this like, sweet small screening and a meeting with a bunch of community folks, some of whom had driven in. Like people had driven from, I think like from North Carolina. Like folks were like, okay, this is now who we want to be connected to. And from that, very quickly, she moved to Little Rock. She established House of Gigi. She established the Oasis. And so just seeing the way that those screening points of contact she built so much community at those screenings was, yeah, just incredible. So I think often about everything that the Little Rock screening turned into.
That was a cool moment. And yeah, like, I mean, her coming out for the film was what initiated her decision to move. And she goes with her instinct.
Yeah.
And it's worked out.
But she just has a keen sense of where she's needed too. Yeah. She's just like, this is where I'm supposed to be. Like, that's it.
I was going to say, I remember we were all in the hotel room and she was talking on the phone to Beck and she was telling Beck about Little Rock and it was on speaker. They were both like, well, we should move here. We should move here. And I think we were just like, oh, that's cute. Like, Major's having a good time here. No, they moved.
Yeah. We'd been there for 12 hours too. Yeah. We were like, we just got here. And Major's just like, this is it.
Yeah, that San Francisco screening too. I mean, that was like one of those moments where you're like, thank God I live here. I love this place. Just being in a room with all these people who are so connected or one degree of separation away from someone else that has lived like a big life like Major has.
All the participants came in for that too. So that was really cool too. It's just being in the middle of all of that, of everybody seeing themselves up there and everybody just cheering for them. Everybody cheering for everybody on screen. Everybody understanding there might be some inside kind of humor that's like specific to San Francisco or that's specific to community or a Major, or people who actually know Major. And everybody just getting to be in that moment with each other was really amazing.
Also fresh from, I think people were very much feeling Melanie and Bobby Jean's
and Jazzy
presence.
Too.
And so there was a way too where that film gave us an opportunity to be with our beloveds in a way that felt really, really fresh. Like it was 2 years. We premiered 2 years after they had passed.
Yeah. It was also a moment like before some of these other visibility in media moments, like, TV show Pose. It was years before that. And it premiered. So you'd already been filming by the time 2014, I think, was when Laverne Cox appeared on the cover of Time magazine. And like the headline was The Trans Tipping Point. And it was like on that crescendo of that wave where like visibility, representation, and some material conditions for people improved, including for Major. I remember at the time, even then though, like Major was tempering it with her prediction that there would be some kind of backlash. And we see that now in, DC, in places like Sacramento with like, Gavin Newsom, who claimed to be a friend of trans people just a couple of years ago, doing just like this total flip. Any reflections for you all on the ebb and flow of the movement?
Well, it's such a catch-22, that whole tipping point. Because I feel like I also remember just feeling like I love being able to be this connected, this vibrant, but also this under the radar. Like there was this point where people didn't necessarily know kind of exactly what they were seeing when they saw us, or if they knew it wasn't a like political thing. And it was like this kind of like, oh, that's just like queer community, or I don't know. I think that people didn't understand, especially in places like San Francisco and New York, and it was starting to happen in other places, like the services that we were able to access at the time. And it feels like, I think I was like feeling like nervous about like, as soon as people start to understand how many of us there are and the ways we're actually getting taken care of in some places, they're going to be really mad. So I remember feeling nervous about that, but also like, as time, like it is that catch-22 because more people, more visibility, the more we get to not feel so alone, the more people get to survive when they know there are others out there like them, but also, the more backlash we're going to hit. So I feel like Annalise and I were talking last night about how there was a point where we didn't have access to these things. And in my experience in my life as a trans person where things were harder to access. And now we're getting back to this place, right? Like there was a time when your hormones maybe weren't covered in certain ways, or you had to have all the letters from all the doctors and all the examinations and say just the right thing to get anything you wanted. And there wasn't, protections for us. And then there kind of were, and now there aren't. It's like, okay, we know how to do this. We've done this before. and it also sucks. And it's also scary, and it is an ebb and flow for sure. But yeah, right now I don't think I ever expected us to be such a scapegoat the way we are right now. I think I knew there would be more people that knew about us and there would be backlash, but I don't think I ever expected us to be at the center of it like this.
Yeah, I mean, like I have all the same thoughts. I think one of the things that I feel maybe looking at Major's story and looking at the film now, I have a lot of gratitude for our historical stories from these periods of time before the tipping point, and being reminded that actually many of us were old enough to have actually been like, you know, my identity is criminalized, the way I have sex is criminalized, I am medically barred from being able to have the things I need, right? Like we lived during that. And that we are 2 generations off from folks who were like, we're incarcerating you for showing up to your probation meeting, you know, with a light dusting. That like we have experience in this country living under fascism. We have experience in this country. Some people have experience in this country in particular living under apartheid state. And that collective wisdom, that our survival skills, that the things that we have done in those moments belong to us, and that corporations have never been a part of liberating us from that. Health insurance companies have never been a part of liberation with that. And so there's something for me that is a reminder of the ways that like, well, like, yeah, we take the things when they come, like have Major be your Grand Marshal in your Pride Parade, but we're not hinging our survival on a Pride Parade, because what happens is the corporations pull out and then you don't get to have a Pride Parade. I mean, there's like 90 other reasons to not hinge survival on a Pride Parade, but we can also just really see the ways. It's just like, right, like Major talks so much through the film about how community takes care of each other. Like when Major's talking about being a cash flow bunch of girls and we get the money to, you know, do what we need to do, which is a line she gives in Diagnosing Difference when she's talking about just like, we got hormones. Like we figured out how to talk to doctors. She's talking about mutual aid, right? Like she's talking about the way we come together as community to bring each other through. So I think that there's a way in which it is our older generations that are going to have wisdom for how we survive these moments. And it is in ways younger generations who maybe came up in the tipping point, who are there as these like, I feel very inspired around the like fuck you, we're not, like no one's going back in the closet. No one's going to be ashamed. You can't put any of us in the back of a police van and threaten us with publishing our names in the paper. Like we're just not going to be afraid of you. And
Too late.
Like it's like you can't get us back in the closet in that way. And we have particularly young people who have grown up with that kind of, it's like a tipping point. Entitlement might be the wrong word to use for it, but there's an emboldening there. Yeah. And, you know, woe to the person who tries to strip that away, because we're not going to have it. And so that, I think, as I rewatch the film now, I feel very connected to that in this moment.
Yeah, it is helpful to know, oh, there have been some shit times in the past, and yet people persisted.
We made art, we had, you know, loved ones, we had like all of these connections, and we kept each other safe. And, you know, I think this is unique. Like if there's a handful of periods in American history when the state puts its full weight behind it, we're in one right now. And that is like scary as fuck. Like I'm not trying to minimize that in any way.
Yeah, I would love to see the next tipping point or whatever. Like there's got to be some better terminology for it. I am hoping that we have seen the bottom. At the end of the day, the community is stronger than it was 10 years ago. We have artifacts like this movie to kind of show what is possible in terms of community. So yeah, thank you both for making it. And just wanted to ask, what are you all working on right now?
Storm is puffing his cheeks out. Do I need to step in as producer? This is Storm and I make films together.
Yes.
And Storm is directing. He's got 2 directorial projects that are kind of like in their nascent forms, and that blowing the cheeks out and looking forlorn is what happens when directors get to the stage where they have to get a thing to the next stop. So like as a producer, I want to come in and be like, Storm has 2 incredibly exciting, awesome projects that are both kind of like in the conceptual / development stage.
Dope.
Have I been a hype man enough? Did I get you set up to talk about them?
You gotta promote. Yeah, like I mean,
you see like the dead in my eyes.
I'm out here barking on the sidewalk. I'm like, come on, live show.
Sorry, let's hear it.
Yeah, I mean,
because we used to like, because I used to be in constant contact with y'all when I was working for Major full time for a minute. And so, yeah, I was like, you know, constantly bugging you about like some premiere on the other side of the world, but like would love to hear what's going on.
Sure. So yeah, it's funny because yeah, I am in this like limbo. I'm just in this limbo state. But so after Major, I made my first directorial debut documentary called The Whistle, which is about lesbian youth culture in Albuquerque, New Mexico in the 70s and 80s, which was a culture I was a part of at the time. In the 80s, I came out in high school as a young little dyke. And from there, I really wanted to get into narrative. And I decided to make a mockumentary that was essentially my second documentary, where I'm going back to New Mexico to now film my family in Roswell and come out to them as trans and get it all on film. In real life, I'm already out to my family. Like, I don't need to do that. But the mockumentary piece is that I'm going back to do that. And my partner, who's a filmmaker based on real life, is in the story very obsessed with the UFO phenomenon in Roswell. And it's been a long time since I've been back. I haven't seen the town in a long time. And I'm just saying, oh, that's just white people bullshit. Like, nobody in Roswell talks about that. It's not a thing. And as we roll into Roswell, there's this huge, which is true, a Welcome to Roswell sign that's basically like a big three-dimensional UFO sucking up cows and Welcome to Roswell. And so the film is called Welcome to Roswell, and it's about a trans filmmaker going to Roswell to come out. And it turns out that the coming out is a non-story. Nobody really cares, but there's a whole group of queer and trans BIPOC alien abductees, UFO abductees who have stories to share. And so the filmmaker reluctantly has to interview all these folks, including like family and stuff. So the filmmaker has to film those stories very reluctantly. And then, hilarity ensues. So that is a film that I'm working on. I've gotten a lot of support for development, which is amazing. I'm not used to getting developmental resources to write a film. And so I got to write it, started thinking about casting, got some folks involved that are interested in helping to produce or executive produce. But now we're just at this is going to cost a lot of money for narrative is way more than documentary. It's a whole other ball of wax. So now it's just a matter of having to raise the funds for that movie. And it's not typically like go and do like Kickstarters or things that we've been able to do in the past or get grants. It's actually having to find investors and producers who have the money or can go find the money. And that's just a whole new arena for both of us. And so that's why you see the look in my eyes. It's just like, oh yeah, that.
I mean, you got to do it. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I still feel like pretty sheepish every time I ask people to go to the Patreon/San Francisco. Yeah, you got to do it. So if anyone out there happens to know someone who knows someone,
right?
But also go to the Patreon and support San Francisco. Go and support Welcome to Roswell. No, because we are in a moment where arts funding, like this country has never done arts funding. Yeah. And we are especially, an industry does not do arts funding. And so one of the ways that we get through this moment is by making art and by supporting people who are making art. So like, I know one of the things that I've definitely like picked up much more of this year is just becoming like a regular subscriber on Patreon and then on my newsletters. And like, it's not a ton of money, but it's money. And I make sure that like, if I'm living on people's newsletters right now, and that is writing. Essay writing is like some of my favorite writing. And so, like give your $5 a month, give your $10 a month, like give the thing that you can for that.
Yeah.
Because it's really vital. And I will say Storm and I are hoping to go out to New Mexico this fall to do a little preliminary development research work on a documentary about women in music in New Mexico, which is a music festival that happened there in the
80s to the 2005. Yeah. So that was another so The Whistle is about my kind of high school community. And this documentary is going to be about, I always say I was raised by a pack of wild lesbians. By a pack of wild lesbians, and so it's about them. It's about these older dykes that kind of brought me up and started to politicize me when I was young, and the music festival that they did. Yeah.
Oh, so yeah.
And then I'll plug a couple of tiny things for myself. I did a docuseries for Sci-Fi that came out in the beginning of the pandemic, so it just kind of got like sucked into our global trauma. Called Looking for Leia, which is just like a piece of candy, tiny short form documentary about women and other kind of like marginalized genders in Star Wars fandom. So if you are at all geeky, you can check that out. It's no longer on Sci-Fi, so the rights reverted back to me. I got the last good streaming deal where I kept the rights to my work, so you can go to lookingforleia.com to find that. But But the thing I've been doing the most of this year in my private practice is trying to really bolster my pro bono hours, providing support letters for folks who are looking to get their gender confirming medical procedures taken care of, particularly right now, as I know a lot of folks are trying to prioritize that kind of care. Those are pro bono regardless of your income. It's just that like seeking out particularly surgical care is expensive enough. So I think it's nice if you have to go through that process of hiring another professional to not have to pay for it. And folks are welcome to reach out to me through my private practice website if they would like resources or more support around that. Again, that is something that I do not charge for. If you keep show notes or something, you can keep my private practice website in that.
Sweet. Will do. Yeah, people can check out the show notes. We'll include some trailers to some of the projects that we just discussed, and also a link to get tickets, if they are not sold out yet, to this showing of 10 Years of Major.
Please come out.
Yeah, come join us
at
at
the
the
Roxie Theater, June 8th. It's nice. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Love the Roxie. Major may or may not be there.
Possibly a sighting of Miss Major there. We're going to find out. But definitely TGIJP will be there. The entire screening is a benefit for TGIJP. Every cent that is made above what they have to pay for what we're paying for the venue goes to TGIJP. So when we talk about supporting our community members, supporting folks doing the good work, this is a way that you can come and get some art and also take care of a community organization that's Miss Major's legacy in the Bay and also is doing beautiful work.
Access notes for the film. There will be open captions. There will be an ASL interpreter. Roxie is wheelchair accessible, and we're requiring N95 masks for everybody, and we'll have some available if folks don't have them.
Cool. Yeah, and TGIJP, as StormMiguel mentioned, StormMiguel worked there. I worked there for a minute, and Major, after Alex Lee founded TGIJP, Major was a big force at TGIJP, and it's all around, people who are incarcerated, formerly incarcerated, who are trans and living mostly in the Bay. So people go out to the movie in the Mission at the Roxie, and we'll have to do one of these again when the mockumentary comes out. Would love to have y'all back and just have an excuse to hang. So
always.
I know. I miss our hangs. This is lovely to getting to hang and chat. And congratulations on the book. Also, I just love getting to see Major out in the world with the book, and it's just so great to have as many different forms of media as we can have, documenting this woman and sharing what she's got. I just love it. It's so great.
Yes.
Congrats on that.
And the documentary made possible the book. Major has picked and chosen all the people in her orbit to make Big Beautiful Family. So pretty sweet. And one of the reasons why I love living in the Bay, that I got connected with people like y'all. So thank you again for coming through. I can't believe it's been 10 years, but so stoked for people who haven't seen the film to see it.
Right, that's a generational mark, right? So especially if you are a person who you're just who are we talking about? What is this film? Come and see an archive of our history at this point. Because also 10 years, the film feels you're getting to see an older school documentary as well. So yeah, we'd love to see that there.
Yeah, Major was the first Black trans woman to be the SF Pride Grand Marshal. First to speak at the United Nations, right? All of our firsts come. Yeah. And you get to hear not just about Stonewall, but more importantly, you get to hear about Attica. You get to hear about the Jewel Box Review. You get to hear about all of these parts of our histories that Major has such a great way of sharing. So hope to see y'all on June 8th. Yes, go see it, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Toshio.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to Sad Francisco. I am Toshio Moronic, and my co-producer is Tofu Estolas. Patreon.com/SadFrancisco is where you can find our past episodes and transcripts, and it's also where you can help us out with a donation. And if you do, it comes with some benefits like getting the episodes a few days early, and our gratitude for allowing us to keep making this podcast, which we love to do. See you next time in Sad Francisco.